trying to talk about our relationships and our marriages and how we can strengthen those. So this is what it is today: intimacy in marriage. I've chosen to take that picture. I was with my wife at a friend's 50th birthday party, and we had to do white and so on. And yeah, we had a great time there together. Before we get into that, there's something I'd like to touch on briefly. It flows from an old concept that we all know in the field of motivation within psychology. Maslow came up with this hierarchy of needs, where he was talking about what motivates people. And his basic thesis at the time was that people are motivated by these needs. And when certain needs are met, then they move on to the next level of needs and so on and so forth. And the highest being self-actualization. But when you come to marriage, different people have structured it differently, for example, and have named it differently. There's a marriage researcher, Eli Finkel, who comes up with a similar structure of what marriage is, what happens with marriage. And I've labeled it this way because so that nobody feels away with the label itself. The first is your aspirant marriages. These are marriages, we will deal with them. And then we have adequate marriages and affluent marriages. And because you see them in the pyramid, the fewer, the affluent marriages are way fewer than the adequate and aspirant marriages. Now, aspirant marriages here at the bottom. That's when couples, their attention, and when I talk about attention, I'm talking about time, energy, and focus. Time, energy, and focus. When your time, energy, and focus is on survival, it's on putting food on the table, it's putting clothes on your bodies, shelter, access to education for your children, access to healthcare. When you are preoccupied with those things and the shelter somewhat has to be safe, then marriage is, as I call it, aspirant. Now, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it would be the two bottom levels there, where that's what we're trying to do. Now, you may look at these marriages, the different, because of this is where they are economically, socio-economically. Their needs are, their intimacy needs are different as well. They at that time, for this marriage to survive and to continue operating for years and years, it needs that part of physical intimacy that is sexual. That's what it needs. It can get more, but that's what it needs. It needs that part of emotional intimacy that provides physical presence and some involvement in parenting. It needs that part of financial intimacy that helps to fund the running of the household, either directly, through cash or through unpaid labor, which is where women come in. So you'll find that because here the focus is on survival, when these things are met, when people are able to put food on the table, they have clothes, they have shelter, the kids are able to go to school, even if it's one of those free, non-fee paying schools, and they have some form of healthcare, generally they feel that the marriage is doing well, life is doing okay, and marriage itself is doing okay. So these are aspirant marriages. Then you have adequate marriages. These marriages, this is when the couple's basic needs are being adequately met. I say being adequately met because it's a continuous thing. Sometimes we have some up and down waves of sorts. And when these needs are being adequately met and their attention now moves, and it is on preferred ways of meeting this need. In other words, where your aspirant marriages want to put food on the table, your adequate marriages start to become concerned with what kind of food, and they start thinking about healthy food. They're now concerned about not eating the same thing they had yesterday. With aspirant marriages, if we have the same thing, every day, as long as we have food, praise the Lord. We find different ways of meal. It's porridge in the morning, it's pap in the afternoon, and mass in the evening. So we generally find ways of using the same thing, and we thank the Lord that there's food. But once you move into the adequate space, this is when your needs have been met. This is when your needs have been adequately being met. Now you have these concerns of certain types of food, certain types of clothing. You now get concerned about colors matching, quality of the clothing, style, fashion. You then get concerned about matters of neighborhood, where you're going to stay, what kind of school your kids go to, the kind of healthcare you have. Now the marriage is adequate. You're now looking at preferred ways of meeting these needs. Now, As this happens, the same applies with the meeting of the needs. Here you need more of your physical intimacy, your financial intimacy, and your emotional intimacy. And here people start pursuing intellectual and spiritual intimacy. We're going to deal with the intimacies themselves. I'm just giving a broad overview. Then you have your affluent marriages. Affluent marriages, this is when the couple's needs, of course, have been covered, and their wants are being adequately met. Now, your needs are things you actually basically need. Your want are the things you desire, you know. And their attention now is no longer on needs necessarily, or these wants that we have. It's on nice to haves, things that are absolutely not necessary in life. At this point, people want experiences, you know, great experiences. They want a good quality of life. This is when people get concerned about the types of holiday destinations they go to. They get concerned about how a particular car reflects on them. They're more concerned about their golf game, you know, and they start wanting to do other things because the basic needs are being met and their wants are being sorted out. Then they have hobbies that they are able to spend money on. They have hobbies and other things that are of interest that they'd like to spend their time, focus, and energy on. These are affluent marriages. And it is in the space of your adequate and affluent marriages where intimacy becomes a problem. Because if people don't get all of the intimacy that they possibly could get, then they look around and they start asking themselves questions like, is this worth it? Is this all there is to life? Can't I get more in life than this? Now, people who are in the affluent space, are able to say, yes, he's a good father, he's a good husband, great provider, he's not violent, he's not abusive at all, but I don't think I can get to where I'd like to be. I feel stagnant. I want to grow. That's when someone says, yes, she's a great mother, she's a great wife, she's all of that, but she's no longer, our interests are not the same. They don't dovetail anymore. We're not in the same space. And people are able to walk away from relationships like those because they have a sense that there's a missing intimacy in the relationship. Now, intimacy becomes very important because sometimes when we look at all these three levels of marriages, and especially if you are aspirant people begin to wonder, why would people need a marriage enrichment seminar? Why would you go to a retreat? I mean, why would you spend all that money to have people talk to you about your spouse? For them, it's a complete waste of money. It's a complete waste of money. They just don't understand why you would need all of that. They feel that these people are finicky. They just don't know what to do with their money. And you hear aspirant people say, if you're to give me that money, yo, imagine what I would do with it. And so that's it. Same applies with some people who still have your adequate marriages. They have the sense that these affluent people, if I could have their kind of money, if I could have their resources, we would be happy. Not realizing that as you move up in the socioeconomic structure in society, your intimate needs change. Your needs for intimacy change. They broaden, they expand. You want more from your relationships. You want more from your marriage. And so it's possible that you started out as an aspirant marriage. Economically, that's where you were. You've now moved on to have an affluent marriage. And the other one is wondering, we have everything. Yes, we have a house, we have a car, we have finances, our kids are going to good schools. What's the problem? I don't understand. We seem to have everything. What you don't understand is that as these needs were being met according to Maslow's thinking, which I agree with, as certain needs are met, you want to move on to other needs. And when you move on to other needs, particularly when it comes to intimacy, they expand. So the intimacy needs that needed to be met when you were still an aspirant marriage, financially, socioeconomically, are not the same intimacy needs that have to be met now that you are affluent or now that you are adequate. So as our situation in life improves, so should our ability to deliver to our spouses for the different intimacy needs that they have. So that's just a little bit of background so that when we talk about it, you don't wonder what's wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with my spouse. Maybe it's the position that he or she has. Maybe it's this and that. Maybe it's the friends. Sometimes It's just the fact that where they are in life now requires, it just attracts different needs, and they have those needs. Now, and those needs have to be met. Now, when we talk about intimacy, I've looked at how different theorists and different psychologists have basically worked on the issue of intimacy over the years. And I found over the years that the easiest way to put together the broad concept of intimacy at this stage, it could improve with time, that for myself is this: that intimacy is feeling understood, appreciated, and cared for by someone you are able to share personal and private thoughts, ideas, dreams, and feelings through words and or actions. Let me say that again. Intimacy is feeling this mutual feeling of being understood, appreciated, cared for by someone you are able to share personal and private thoughts, ideas, dreams, and feelings. Now, you do this through words and or actions. Now, intimacy itself does not require that the two people be in agreement all the time. But the absence of the fear of rejection when you share these personal and private thoughts and feelings, the fact that you don't fear rejection is part of what makes it intimate, because the safety of this relationship now, it's what allows you to share more and more about yourself with ease. It's what allows you to be yourself easily, because you don't fear that the reaction of the person will shut you down, will make you cringe, will make you feel small. Because you don't have that fear, you easily open up, you easily share who you are, what your thoughts are, what your feelings are. It happens. Now, that's what we mean by intimacy. Now, when we talk about intimacy, particularly in marriage, a number of people quickly run to sexual intimacy, because most of the time when we say intimacy, it ends up going there. But I thought I'd take this photograph from Pinterest. They have this photograph of a house on stilts. And sexual intimacy, just to illustrate my point, is the house. See it as the house. But then the stilts on which the house is built is your emotional intimacy, your physical intimacy, your experiential intimacy, your spiritual, your financial intimacy. And sometimes these allow you to have the sexual intimacy. And then from the sexual intimacy, you'll find that you can also enhance these that you have. So it's a very important thing. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight it this way is so that when you think of sexual intimacy, you don't think about it in isolation. You don't think about it in terms of if you're not being sexually intimate with your spouse, you think that the problem is necessarily sexual. There are instances where it is necessarily sexual, but to a very large degree, it is because the stilts aren't there. And without the stilts, then you don't really necessarily have this house standing securely. Sometimes you have bits and pieces of some of these intimacies. And that's why the sexual intimacy is not coming through in the marriage. So I wanted us to think about it this way. Now, when we talk about different types of intimacy, now these stilts that I'm talking about, if you check anyone who's going to talk about intimacy today, particularly in relationships, they're basically gonna list at the very minimum 4 of these. And of course, some have gone to others, they've split these into many others, and then the list goes on and on and on. But for the purposes of today's exercise, we're just gonna deal with these 6, and then we move on. Before we even talk about sexual intimacy, there's an emotional intimacy that has to be there. Now, this emotional intimacy is that feeling of closeness and warmth, that feeling of being cared for, and that's the emotional intimacy. And you'll find that many times when we start a relationship, this is where we start. Many times when we start a relationship, we start here with emotional intimacy, and usually it flows from discussion. We talk, and the more we talk, the more we realize that things are going well. We are connecting. You hear someone saying that we are able to gel, we are able to connect, and you feel that it's easy to talk to this person and share who you are with this person and to spend time with the person. That's the emotional intimacy. It flows from conversation, and you'll notice that the conversations we have, we're not very critical of one another. We're not, we are very easy people to be with. We don't attack, we don't try to correct the other person. We just allow the other person to be, and we constantly communicate the sense that we appreciate that they are there. We appreciate their company, we appreciate their time. And that emotional, the closeness, the warm feeling you have towards the other person, it grows, it develops because of how you handle one another. You get into marriage, one of the things that suffer in marriage because of the day-to-day running of the household, you'll find that because we are raising children, sometimes even before children are raised, we have to manage the house, we have to clean, we have to finance it, we have to do all of those things, still go to work, come back tired and watch TV, or if you want your TV people, or whatever it is that you do. The day-to-day nature of living together and trying to adjust to living with one another means that we constantly find we not constantly, we find ourselves trying to correct the other person. We find ourselves being critical of the other person, sometimes with the best of intentions, because we want the person to improve. We want the person to be better than they currently are. And so we become critical of the other person. And sometimes our reactions are unpleasant reactions. We say things to one another that are very hurtful. We attack one another in fights. And we forget that the things we said in a fight linger after the fight. And so after a while, that easy communication, that easy conversation kind of dies out. And because we live with one another, because we live together, we wake up in the same bed every day and we come back to the evening to the same house. Over time, we stop expressing our appreciation for the other person. We get a sense that they know we appreciate them. And you even get to a point where you say, would I do everything I do for them if I did not appreciate them, if I was not happy that they were here? Of course, there are times when we are not happy with the spouse and we say things and wish you were not here, I regret ever meeting you, we should not have gotten married, blah, 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 and we don't go back to clean it up. So these things mess up the emotional intimacy because we end up talking less. We end up being afraid to talk about things. We end up being afraid to share things about ourselves because we are going to be attacked. We're not sure how it's going to be received by the other person. And so that fear of being attacked, that fear of not being handled well, based on how you've been handled in the past now that we've been married, is what makes us talk less. And we stick to safe topics and safe subjects. And those safe topics that we talk about and safe subjects that we talk about don't really allow us to connect. They don't give us a sense that we can open up, but they maintain peace. And when you ask the person, why don't you have those kinds of conversations you used to have, they say they're just trying to maintain peace. And it's true, you try to maintain peace, and it's an expensive thing because you lose on the emotional intimacy. Now, when the emotional intimacy gets eroded, it takes more effort to end up being sexual. Because the feeling of closeness, it's not there. It then has to be generated cold turkey. When you get into the bedroom, that's when someone indicates that they are interested in sex. And then that issue of foreplay becomes a task because now you have to say, you must start in the morning, which is true. You must start in the morning, kind of the foreplay doesn't just start when you get into the bedroom. But when you say that, the presupposition of that is that emotionally you guys are connected. There is that feeling of warmth and closeness. But if the feeling is not there, if there is no feeling of warmth and closeness between you, then it's not going to happen. You're not really going to start seducing your spouse in the morning because of something that's happening in the evening. You're probably not even thinking about what's probably going to be happening tonight. Right now, you just want to get through the morning and get through the day. So the emotional intimacy part becomes important. Now, before you talk about no sexual intimacy in the marriage, then the first question I would ask is, but how is the emotional intimacy? How's the connection? Can you just sit and chat about something that you're afraid of, something that a desire that you have, thoughts, your inner, even ideas you're still thinking about? Can you just express your feeling? Can you be yourself with this person? If it has eroded over time, then the problem may not necessarily be sexual. The sexual part may just be how it manifests itself. We just need to reconnect. We really need to reconnect emotionally, which means that we probably need to sit down and have a restart conversation and say, look, let's hit a reset button. Let's handle each other well. Let's not attack one another, so that the other one cannot be afraid to talk, so that the other one cannot be afraid to share their who they are, so that we can have feelings of closeness. And beyond the issue of conversation, just spending time together. Because remember, that's how we started out, spending time together, doing things you like together. That's how you want to build. It's going to be easy for that to flow into something very sexual. But until it's there somewhat, you will discover that the emotional intimacy part is going to be difficult. Now, the second part I want to talk about here is intellectual intimacy. Now, intellectual intimacy ranges from having someone your friendships of people who are married can end up being sexually intimate relationships, and genuinely did not see it coming. Why? An intellectual intimacy, where you have someone you feel comfortable to talk to, comfortable to bounce your ideas off of, someone who's like an intellectual sparring partner. If you follow boxing, boxers have a sparring partner, somebody who they practice with before the actual fight. And so they have this partner, and the purpose of the partner is not to hurt you, it's not to harm you, but it is to improve you. It is to help you to anticipate certain things so that you can be better. They're trying to refine your skill and improve it. Now, an intellectual sparring partner is someone you can throw an idea with. This is what I'm thinking about. Anything. It doesn't have to be something serious. It could be about a song. It could be about the weather. It could be about something you read in the newspaper, something you heard in the news. It could be about anything under the sun. It could be something serious. It could be something that it's part of your studies. It could be about your work. It could be anything. But the idea that you can bounce an idea off this person, and you're not afraid that when they respond, they will shut you down, they will call you stupid, the idea is stupid, what were you thinking, blah, blah, blah. But instead, when they raise issues with whatever idea you have, they will say, if you thought about this, what about that? Then what are you going to do about this? And you feel, as you're having the conversation, that you are heard, that the person hears you, that the person understands you, and that the person is just stretching your thinking, and you walk away from this conversation better than you were when you came in. Your ideas have been enriched, and you've talked, you've shared thoughts and ideas, and you've been able to bounce your ideas around, and in the process, sometimes you're able to change the idea itself because of the interaction you have with this person. Now, this intellectual intimacy, this ability to share these ideas, freedom, and the safety you feel to share the ideas is the intellectual intimacy. Now, sometimes you'll find that someone will be when we're starting out in our relationship, we have this with our spouse. We're able to share thoughts, ideas, share thoughts about anything, bounce, debate, discuss, have long chats. And someone asks you, what were you talking about this whole time? You say, I don't know, but it was great conversation. It was a great conversation. You're sharing ideas. You're bouncing ideas. Before you present something at work, you give it to your person. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And you're able to do it. And you get married. And sometimes we can be very reckless when we are married. And then they share less of that. They share that less and less. And two, they stick to the safe thing, such that if they were planning to do something, they don't tell you while they are planning it. They tell you when it's actually going to succeed. because they don't want to tell you what they are planning. And then when it doesn't work out, you end up mocking them or making fun of them. So they're afraid at the planning stage, at the dreaming stage. They want to tell you something when they feel that it's already fully cooked, it's ready to be shared with the general public. Then they share it with you too, because they're just afraid. Why? Things have happened. Things have been said in the marriage that makes it difficult for the person to be able to share their ideas. And so they will find that they'll find somebody else they can be intellectually intimate with. Sometimes it's a friend, and it's safe if it's a friend of the same sex. Well, yeah, hopefully same with same orientation too. So it's safe. So they have a friend. Sometimes they have a colleague that they are able to share this with, because they're unable to do it with you, because they're afraid of the reaction. So they should find somebody else to be intimate with. And as I've said earlier on, this is where a lot of married people have found themselves in the trap of having relationships, because when it started out, they did not think this was going to be an affair. They were not planning to have an affair. They just had found somebody they could be intellectually intimate with, someone they could talk to. They found somebody they could freely open up and talk about their dreams, ambitions, their stupid ideas, someone they could feel like an expert talking about soccer, because I like soccer. Of course, I'm a Kaizer Chiefs fan, and it's messing up our blood pressure, but it's better than it was the other times. So you watch, you can come back and share your thoughts about and feel like an expert to this person, because they listen to you. They listen to you and they understand where you're coming from. They don't belittle you. And so it is this intellectual intimacy that sometimes leads to something sexual. And the people did not see it coming. They didn't see it coming because it was not a plan. Now, when we look at our marriages, and sometimes you'll find that the intellectual intimacy is missing. It's not there. You don't see your spouse as that person that you can bounce your ideas off of, that you can risk sounding like a fool or an idiot too, because you're bouncing off something you may not even have thought through. Sometimes we have ideas and we have not carefully thought them through. The idea is still at this infancy stage, but you need someone to share the idea, who's not going to mock you and ridicule you. So sometimes in our marriages, the sexual part is a problem. People say we haven't had sex in a while, there's no sexual intimacy here, we need to pray for that. It's a good thing, we need to pray. But then I have to ask, and I want you to think about it in your own situation. How is the intellectual intimacy? When you think about sharing ideas, thoughts, feelings, dreams, funny, kinky things you may have in your mind, is your spouse a person you could be comfortable sharing those thoughts with? And if not, then you may find that the intellectual intimacy is also contributing to the fact that the sex part is not there, and it's even when it happens, it's very dull, it's very bland, and it leaves you feeling unsatisfied, dissatisfied. So, and yet the problem is the intellectual intimacy. Then next we have physical intimacy. Now, physical intimacy, unfortunately, it's one of those intimacies that when we talk about, sometimes we can easily reduce it to sex. And yet it's not that. I'm going to go back to the start of the relationship. At the start of the relationship, you spoke, you talked, and you felt close. But once that there's something that's considered physical intimacy, as much as it's not physical, but I understand why it's considered physical intimacy, and I somewhat agree. That those prolonged stares, when you look at someone, they look at you, and the look that would have lasted a second with someone you don't know, a form of intimacy. And I'm okay with it being under physical intimacy because it usually leads to it, probably. So yeah. Not completely, but someone could say it's emotional, but it's fine. But then afterwards, you'll find that your intimacy moved in the different levels of touch. You know, probably you held the person's shoulder above their clothes, and then at some point you hold their hand or stuff like that. Now the holding of the hand, you know, sitting next to each other with our arms touching or our legs touching, sitting next to each other, that is physical intimacy. You hold hands with this person, holding the person's hand and holding them with your fingers, you know, interlocked like that. That's a form of physical intimacy. Of course, we hug people, and that's emotional intimacy. But it's a different kind of hug, you know, this hug that makes you feel like, yes, you really enjoy hugging this person. So from the level, from that point where you're looking at each other, to the point where you're holding hands, you interlocking fingers, and you're hugging one another, and then you can even try the whole kissing thing. You can kiss the person's hand, and you know, just trying to feel your way around how far this thing can go. By the time you get to kiss the person, probably on the lips or something like that, that's serious emotional intimacy. Now, yes, we're going to get to sexual intimacy and that later. The inadequacy of the sexual intimacy. How are the other preceding acts of physical intimacy between the two of you? Smile. Do you still do? Doesn't have to be every day, but when was the last time you held each other's hand? Oh, but it was just because your hand was there. When was the last time you held each other with hands with interlocking fingers? When was the last time you just shared a kiss that was not preceding sexual intimacy? Just to kiss somebody. And I'm not even necessarily, and it's good to have those regular hello, goodbye kisses. That's great. But in addition to that, when was the last time you just kissed each other because the other person was there? Just because the one is there. Not because. Now it's these other, you know, sometimes you hold each other, you hug, you hold the other person from the back, you touch their face. You know, sometimes people enjoy having their face touched, to touch their head or touch their hair. When was the last time put their hand around your waist, you know, touch your legs, your knees, your thighs, or whatever. When was the last time those things happened? Because if those are not happening, if the touch is going to start now in the bedroom because we're going to have sex, then it's going to be very awkward. It's going to be very dry. It's going to be very mechanical. So the intimacy can't just be touching the person in bed because you're now going to have things. There needs to be holding and touching and hugging, and that's part of the physical intimacy. So when we think about being physically intimate with our spouses, we must just remember that the sex is like just at the end of the whole thing, before they can generate intimacy in the bedroom. And I'm not saying when you're planning, okay, today I'm planning to do this, I'm going to touch her today, because once you say I'm going to hold my spouse, I'm going to touch on the cheek, I'm going to kiss on the cheek, I'm going to hold around the waist, and then that only happens because you want to have sex in the evening. After a while, the spouse will know, today, what happened? Held my hand, he wants something in the evening. It just defeated the purpose. This lifestyle, something that we do, something that we bring back into our relationship, not because the marriage will necessarily collapse. Some will dry up and eventually collapse, but simply, and I'm not saying this because I'm trying to introduce something new. You'll find that in the majority of our marriages, we had this before. It's not something new. We had it. It's just that sometimes we think that because we've got years together, because we agree that I love them, the other person knows that I appreciate them, they know that I care for them. Yeah, but these intimacies are not just about knowing, it's about experiencing them. So this person needs to experience it, and with physical intimacy, they need, how is that feeling? Is it there? The closeness and the warmth, is it there? Intellectual intimacy, do you feel safe, and are you able to share ideas, both of you, with one another about your thoughts, feelings? Are you able to do that? And thirdly, are you physically intimate outside of sex? Outside of sex, are you physically intimate? Now, then there's experiential intimacy. Experiential intimacy is different from the others, and it's self-explanatory in the sense that it's talking about the experiences you have together. And the experiences that you have could be great experiences, could be big things. Like for example, I've chosen to use a photograph there, where from the time I met my wife, she's always wanted to go to Paris, and so at some point it was possible, and we went, and she was excited, and that's it. Then that's a great experience. It's a big thing, you know. Of course, we went there. She was happy. Saw the Eiffel Tower, took pictures. But it could also be small things like taking a walk together. It could be like going to buy an ice cream together and finding, you know, something, just you were there, you met people together. The fact that you were there to reference, you remember, when you remember so-and-so, sometimes you see a funny red car, you talk about it because it has a particular meaning to you that it does not have to somebody else. Now, these experiences, they bond you together. And in marriage, after you've been there together, for you to develop desire for one another, you need newness, you need adventure, you need something different than what it was yesterday. So the fact that you've been to a wedding and you came back together and you're able to talk about, share that particular experience together, and you go to a funeral together, and you go to a restaurant together, and you go to the camp meeting together, you go to that event together. Now, those experiences does not always need background. Your conversation can simply build on one or two words because it triggers a previous experience and you're able to talk about it. So these experiences we have are very important. Now, when they help to enhance the intimacy. Now, one of the things I would ask is, if you're thinking about the fact that in the marriage, the sex is not really firing on all cylinders, you have similar experiences. I'm not saying you synchronize your entire lives. Times you go to a wedding, you go to a funeral, you go shopping, you go to, just do it together. Why do it together? You do it together because it adds to the things you see together, the things you talk about together, the things you experience together, the things you hear together. All of those things give you more, such that when we are relating an experience of, remember when we went there, we are able to tell the story together. Why? Because we were both there. When we are talking about what happened at a particular wedding or at a particular funeral, with the other one is able to nod, add a few details together, and that helps. It adds to the intimacy that we. Now, if you have not been doing things together for whatever reason, I would say just plan to do things together, plan to have experiences together, plan to go places together, plan to do things together. Why? Because those things that you plan to do together and actually get to do together, they add to the intimacy that you have in your marriage. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is spiritual intimacy. Everybody is born with spirituality. Spirituality has our capacity to and desire to connect with the divine, and our desire to pursue him, to please him, to live and according to what the divine wants. That's spirituality. Every one of us has that capacity to connect with the divine, and that's God. Every one of us has the capacity is God. We have it. Now, religion is the content. For example, your religion will say in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The content of who God is, what God has done, what God wants, and that's it. So we have different religions. All of these religions are an attempt for people to live out their spirituality. They're trying to connect with God. They're trying to connect with whoever they consider to be divine, to be the divine. So that's spiritual. Now, that's spirituality and religion. Now, as Christians, Christianity becomes a religion. Adventism is an expression of a particular religion, and that's the content part of it. But we do so because we have this inbuilt desire to connect with God, this inbuilt desire to know Him, to live out our lives to please Him. Spiritual intimacy is when you are able to share with your spouse spiritually your journey with God, your understanding of who God is, your understanding of what God wants from you, your understanding of how you respond to God and how God has played out in your life and worked in your life. Now, to be able to share that, not just the thoughts and ideas about that, but to be able to share the different disciplines that come with your spirituality, whether it's to be able to sing together or go to church together or pray together or whatever the case may be, that is the spiritual intimacy. You are able to involve your spouse in your own journey, spiritual journey, and spirituality with your spouse. Now that's spiritual intimacy. Now you are able, it's easier. It's intimate moment, or easier for your sexual intimacy is fine. Now, when you're able to relate spiritually, and I'm not talking about sitting down and having deep conversations. I'm talking about the ease of just starting a song and the other person joins in. The ease of saying, let's pray for the food, and the other person just joins in with the prayer. Well, let's pray and you pray, let's read this. You know what, I read this, I was thinking about this. The ease of doing that, the ability to do so and share this comfortably, this is a spiritual intimacy. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is financial intimacy. Now, the financial intimacy is when you are able to share in the finance. Now, the financing of life is not just the money. It starts with the willingness to share information. Now, couple to another, one relationship to another, there will be a variation of how much information can be shared. There are people who are married who don't know how much their spouses earn. They've never seen their spouses payslip. No clue. Spouses earn. They don't. There are people who have no clue what their spouse's sources of income and how much comes in. They don't know how the money goes out. There's no joint planning for anything, really. It's a question of you pay for that, I'll pay for this, and other than that. And it's fine, it works for them. But you'll find that probably one of them may want to know more, because the more you know about one another, the more you are able to that, hey man, I'm broke, I don't have money, the case maybe. But the ability to open up and share with this person and not be afraid that it's going to end up being a big fight is part of the financial intimacy. Yes, by the time you fund it jointly, all the things that money does jointly, not because you've decided you're both going to pay, but you both understand that that's going to be done, this is going to be done, this is how much money we have left, this is what we're going to do with the money, and you're able to have your long-term plans. That it adds to you feeling close to the person and feeling warm to the person, because intimacy needs it meets this need to be understood. They want to be known. We want to be known. We want to be understood. We want to be cared for. And the more I'm able to open up to you about everything, including my money, including my financial fears, including my financial dreams, that is an intimacy that is there. Now, I've highlighted all of these things so that of our sexual intimacy in a marriage, the house, as you see in the picture, we may start thinking about the stills to say, how are the stills? How are they doing? Do I need to improve? Because as you improve these other stills in your relationship, you will find that it is easy for this thing to slip over. Your intimacy, these other forms of intimacy, it's easy for them to quickly translate into something sexual when they are being enhanced. So before we run to say the problem is sexual on these other things, and as I've highlighted, they're not big things, they're not massive things. They're things we can start. And I'm hoping that as we were talking, you just probably noted more of, because you'll find that as you add more of these, it flourishes. So that's what happens in our relationships. The longer we say marriage to one another, the greater the risk that we take each other for granted, that we're not going to invest in these different forms of intimacy and just think that the sex is the go-to intimacy. Whereas there are other forms of intimacy, and you'll be in the emotional intimacy, in the intellectual, in the physical, and I cannot stress important, just to hold the other person's hand, just to put your arm around the other person's shoulder, or arm around the person's waist, just to touch them when you're sitting next to them. Those things are big. Everything down, just look at me, pay attention to me. Just as you watch television, for those who do watch television, you can watch television, holding hands with someone's legs sitting, that there's touch. That is the physical intimacy. And it easily translates into something else. If you make that into a lifestyle, it's going to be very, very, very helpful. So that's the foundation. Those are the stilts of the sexual intimacy in marriage. And I hope that as we look at our lives and our marriages, we may identify the stilts that may need repairing, repair them. And you'll be amazed at how those easily and comfortably slide into something more sexual. Now, we've highlighted this before, and I just want to highlight it again, that it's important that you understand that there are different ways in which people want to be loved. And I'm a huge fan of this, Gary love languages. And find out what your love language. Now, for someone who may not know what we're talking about here, Gary Chapman says that people are loved in a particular way, and he's boiled them down to 5 love languages. It's true, there are other theorists who've come up with more love languages, and it's fine. And as you look at them, you may find that there are more than 5. It's okay. But he started out with his 5 basic love languages. And he told that they're loved, that they're beautiful, that they're handsome, that they did well. They need to be complimented. They need to be told something good about themselves. They need to be appreciated for the good things that they are doing. And I'm not talking about wow things. I'm talking about simple things, even things that you believe they are own responsibilities, words of affirmation. And then he says the other one is physical touch. Other people, for them to feel loved, they need to be touched physically. They need to be, that's part of the physical. That's it. They need the physical touch. And without the touch, they don't quite feel loved. And I'm not even talking about sex here. It's everything from you never touch me, you never hold me, you never hold my hand, you never put your arm around my waist. Why is it? Are you ashamed of me? Blah, 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 all of those things. And when the person is basically raising those things, it's usually because their love language is physical touch. Some other people, the third one he talks about is quality time. This is when someone wants to spend time with you. They want to spend time with you. Either spend time doing something with you, or spend time just doing nothing, just talking to you, sharing or hugging or looking out, watching the waves for those people on the coast. But whatever, they just want to spend time with you. And the quality time, once you bring the third or fourth person, it's no longer quality time. It's just group time. Other people want acts of service. They feel loved when you do something for them. Whether you're going to end up mowing the lawn for them or washing dishes for them or doing something. And here you find that for the person, it's the effort you put into it for them that matters. They cherish. These are the people who say, can you believe that I asked him to go and get me this particular perfume? And then it was not at this shop, you moved and went to the next shop, it was not there, moved. And then as you relate the story of the 5 shops you went to, the other person gifts, we all like gifts, but some people feel loved when they're given gifts. And when you don't give them gifts, it's as if you don't love them enough. It's as if you're not heavily invested in the relationship. At the reason I was raising this is so that when we think of our spouses and working on those skills, let us remember to figure out how they are loved and try and build on those skills based on how they are loved, their particular love language, and how they can feel loved. I hope that the time we've spent together has some of you. Yes, we want our marriages to be intimate as time goes on. Thank you very much, Connie.
Thank you very much, Pastor. I am sure people understand or know their love language. Mm-hmm. I wonder what I love walking around. Mine is being out on the go. Walk around with me, I'm very happy. And if I can buy stuff, I'm even happier.
Yes, retail therapy, true. It works for a lot of people.
Being out, Pastor. I love being out. Now, if there are questions you'd like to ask Pastor Lupondwana, please feel free to do so now, but you're going to have to just see the Quran. Want to make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
It's Perry.
Oh, I don't know. I thought someone was saying something.
It sounded like it, Pastor.
All right.
Okay. Are there no questions, no comments, nothing?
It appears not so far. I'm not sure if you have anything that is coming through on your Facebook page.
There is nothing at the moment, Pastor. I think it was so clear. Once again, it was brilliantly done, Pastor. Thank you.
I thank you very much, Ben. I'm looking at what Mr. Falcon is saying. It says, so as we watch TV tonight, we shall be holding hands. Thank you, Mfundis. That's good. That's nice. It's small things like those, that just make you feel connected,
So, gentlemen, remember the love language for ladies: clean the house, do the dishes. Yeah, you will be.
Connie?
Yes.
For some people, cleaning the house is not a very strong spiritual gift. but I must tell any husband who's listening, if your wife is usually the one who washes dishes and you do them, trust me, the dividends will be good. Yes, the dividends will be good.
Also, amen to what I said. Okay. So they're just commenting, very insightful session, absolutely school this evening. Thank you, Pastor, good presentation. We're never too old to learn. And sometimes we know things, but it's good to get reminded.
You're reminded, true. I see Dumile here has raised a hand. Go ahead, Dumile.
Thank you, Pastor Mandla, for the presentation. I just want to ask one question in terms of what was said. You mentioned that it is preferable and safe to have those intellectual conversation with the same sex. I just wanted you to just touch on the dangers of the opposite sex and what it comes up with if that happens. Is it wrong to have those connections with the opposite sex? And then what would be the issue that we might be raising for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not wrong. Let me start there. It's not wrong to have those conversations with members of the opposite sex. That when I mentioned it, I indicated that this is where a lot of married people have found themselves in sexually intimate relationships with people who are friends. The idea was never to have an affair. The idea was never to have something sexual. It's just that they were able to connect with the person. They were able to have conversations that were personal and deep, and they felt understood by this person. You know, they felt that they connected in a way that was intellectual. And it was very, and as I say, because it was not intended to be sexual, they opened up, and the sexual feelings, once you connect, even if it's an intellectual connection, it's easy for them to flow in that direction. It doesn't mean that everybody who has that kind of connection with a member of the opposite sex, that's what's going to happen. It's just that that's what has happened sometimes in the past. And this is how I phrased it, by saying it is safer. Because there are people who have friends of the opposite sex and that has not happened. It is just safer. And if I were to give advice, I would say the advice would be to have that kind of intellectual intimacy. First prize is to have it with your spouse. That's first prize. But there are times when you have to recalibrate. This is a phrase that's used by Eli Finkel. You have to recalibrate the expectations you have for your marriage, because sometimes we are going through different spaces in life. I'll give an example. You may be having small children at home. You both have to go to work. You have small children. You pick up from work, from daycare when you're coming back from work, and you have to come home, start the second shift of cooking, taking care of the kids, and so on. Sometimes the energy isn't there for the other person to sit and listen to dreams and thoughts and whatever. And this is not going to be a permanent thing. It's going to pass, because kids are going to grow older and you'll get more time together. But there are times when you find that the situation right now, working hours and all of that stuff, is such that for the next year or two, your spouse may even be studying. It's just not going to be doable, where you recalibrate your expectations from your spouse, and you get this intellectual intimacy from a friend or something like that, or a colleague. But it would always still be safer, according to my opinion, for you to have that form of intimacy. If you can't have it with your spouse, with a member of the same sex, and I even said, hopefully, who does not have an orientation that could lead to both of you having something, even though you're of the same sex. Thank you.
Okay, someone, is it Skumbuzo? Paula's hand is up. If you can unmute yourself, and then we can go ahead.
Okay. Okay, Skumbuzo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Just have a question on love languages.
Yes. Skumbuzo has left. Is he still there? Skumbuzo has left the building.
Oh.
All right.
Okay, I'm back again.
Okay.
All right. The question is on love language. Suppose maybe my wife, her love language is she wants to be showered by gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I try to start doing that, and it will be giving, well, very positive reaction from her. But now, as time goes by, it becomes a norm that, like, she expects me to always, when I come back home, and she expects me to be carrying some gifts. Is there a limitation, or is it okay for me to feel like the expectation is now too high, or it's now leading to excessive? I don't know if you get my question. Or like,
I get your question.
Yes, like, let's say myself, maybe my love language is maybe words of affirmation, and then I tend to expect her to be always praising me, always giving me words of affirmation, even when she's not in a good space. Or there are times where we are not in a good space as couples, maybe financial or not okay, but like I still expect her to do that. Like, is there a limitation for showing out your love language?
Your love language.
Yes.
I'm so happy that Connie is a wife, and she smiled as if she's going to give a wifely response to the gifts. I'm going to combine your question with a question that comes from the Brown couple, and I'm assuming these are the Browns that I know. Oh, good. The question is, if one or two intimacy levels are not met, even after I bring them up, do you just give up on them and accept the lack of intimacy levels? I'm going to connect this with this. Our marriages ideally should be in a position to give us the fullness of the different intimacy levels completely. I say ideally because in the evolution of marriage, Esther Perel, a relationship therapist, talks about how today, because we have these marriages, of these romantic marriages, we have come to expect from our spouses what an entire village used to offer. So the things you used to do with your friends, you now expect your wife and your husband to do. So there are certainly more in intimacy needs that used to be felt with a friend, but now we want our spouses to be our best friends. We want our spouses to be our trusted confidants, she says. We want our friends to be our lovers. We want them to be our co-parents. So everything people who finance life through, we want them to be our spiritual companion. So things that used to be done by a number of people, and your spouse just fulfilled a few roles. The argument is that now we've expected our spouse to fulfill all of those. And not every spouse is able, and not every marriage is able to meet all of those intimacy needs. And that's one of the things we just have to accept. Not every spouse. But the reason I mentioned the three levels of the marriage is that people in the affluent marriages tend to expect it from their spouses, from their marriages, as if it's a given. And they can walk away when one of those intimacy levels are not met because they feel there's more to life than this. This is why you can sometimes see these multimillionaires and billionaires walk away and they say, we still get along, we're still friends, we still love each other. Like, why divorce? Well, some intimacy levels are not being met. So because not all marriages and not all relationships and not all spouses will be able to fully meet needs, it's important that we recalibrate our expectations. You expected to get your intellectual intimacy from your spouse. It doesn't seem to be coming through, so you end up getting that from a friend. You expected to be able to do, to experience this whole gym, exercise, healthy living kind of thing with your spouse. Not happening, so you end up doing it with your friend. So you end up going to the gym with your friend. You end up going walking, jogging, cycling, rowing with your friend. Why? Because you're not getting that with your spouse. You are hoping to become massive football fans together. Your spouse is not into, for example, when I first met my wife, I was into football. She not so much. When I tried to introduce her into South African football, we would watch, she would hear the sound of vuvuzelas and say, it sounds like bees, and they don't stop. They go for the whole match. Bzzz, and so it couldn't work. So we needed to, so that idea that we were going to sit and watch Kaizer Chiefs slap Pirates 6-0. I'm not sure if we've done 6-0, but whatever the case was, the idea that we were going to do it together, in Kaizer Chiefs shirts, not going to happen. So you recalibrate expectations. So that's basically what happens in life. You recalibrate your expectations. But when you feel that this need is going to be met over there, because there are times when you and your spouse, there are people who've married people who are not religious at all. They're just not religious, and you are. And for them, it's just bare minimum. If they've prayed for the food, they're sorted. So where do you get your spiritual intimacy? You get them in your Sabbath school class, you get them from other people and, within the church group. But it's just that when you recalibrate these expectations and you have these intimacy needs met elsewhere, you must be aware of the capacity of these intimacy needs being met, that capacity of the meeting of the intimacy needs of developing into something sexual. This is why you have to be very safe in the selection of a choice. So to your question, is there a limit? There is no limit to the number of gifts I can get if that's my love language. But as the person who wants to be receiving gift, I have to somewhat be very realistic about my expectations. And if they were very high, recalibrate them, readjust them so they meet the situation. Because you're not going to get gifts every day. I mean, unless someone is really seriously moneyed, you're not going to get gifts every day. And you're not going to be complimented every day. There are days you're going to irritate your spouse from here to kingdom come, and they really wonder what they did to marry you. You're not going to get compliments every day. So if you expected that, recalibrate those expectations and come to reality. And as the one doing the loving, You just pump those gifts as often as you can sustainably get them. And for those who are giving compliments, just give those compliments, especially when you're not fighting, because they will help you when you feel like not talking to the other one. The fact that you've built up a huge bank balance of compliments will take care of those instances where the compliments are not forthcoming.
And if you want gift all the time, Pastor, you must marry Father Christmas.
Yeah, even Father Christmas comes once a year. Sometimes it gives you the wrong gift. I remember as a child, I asked Santa Claus for one thing, Father Christmas for one thing. He gave me something completely different.
Then there's Tony. Tony, if you can unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tony's
Okay.
soon to be wife. And what I want
to be wife.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I wanted to find out from you is, are there gender in the intimacy scale that you used? Are there ones where genders are more skewed to traits of intimacy than sort of males? I don't want to say male versus female, male and females, because it's not a fight. It's understanding that males do have a certain build-up and females do have a certain, so the intimacies in the scale that you shared may be slightly different for each gender. Equal, but not the same.
Yes, there are, and of course, there's a lot of debate even among psychologists about this. But I'm one of those people who subscribes to the view that there are. Let's talk about emotional intimacy, for example. Both men and women crave emotional intimacy. We all want it, and it's just that the expression of how it's built up. Women also, I think, because of the way we've been raised and the way we grow up as boys and girls, women tend to place a higher premium on it than men. The emotional intimacy, the connecting emotionally is bigger than men, bigger in women than in men. Physical intimacy, you'll find that men are bigger on physical intimacy than women, particularly when we are still younger. I say particularly when we're still younger because we get older and the ladies' testosterone shoots up and our estrogen shoots up, and they're the ones who are boom, 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 with V8 engines. But basically, when we're still younger, men are more into the physical stuff. This is why you'll find that it's the guys who want to be holding your hand, who want to be touching your body, your legs. And of course, because there's always the physical intimacy is always somewhat connected to the sexual. It's as if this is in a build up to it. And sometimes it is a build up to it because the testosterone level that's high in men, particularly when we are younger, it creates a very higher libido than with women. Not always the case. There are women who have higher libido than their husbands, but generally, you'll find that men have a higher sex drive than women, and so they're more prone to touch, to kiss, to hug, to want to touch you all over and legs and everything. And you're like, no, wait, let's just talk. Why do you always want to talk? And it's not because women are not into physical intimacy or even sexual intimacy. It's simply, it's just that the premium is higher on the emotional part. Than it is for men. And for men, as much as men also crave and desire emotional intimacy, when we are younger, particularly, the premium is more on the physical and sexual intimacy. So that's it. So it's just, now this does not mean that when your spouse does not have, husband's appetite, sexual appetite is less than yours, you're going to think it's probably being met somewhere, because that's what Pastor said. No, not everybody, but generally that is the case. So you do have those intimacies that are like that. Now, the intellectual intimacy, you'll find that of all people want someone that can share ideas with. They do. I have not seen any necessarily change there. Same applies with your spiritual. Financial sometimes can be an issue depending on electric vehicle powered, depending on how you've been socialized to think. There are men, for example, who were raised to believe that women waste money. So they try not to tell women their wives how much money they have. And even when they're going to give the money, they turn around and they try and hide and say, how much you want? And then you hand over. How much is that? Why? Because in their mind, they're trying to protect their money. from the wife because they were told that wives are wasteful of money. So sometimes you'll find that they don't want to be financially intimate because of that. And the other one say, open up, and they are afraid that you're, and sometimes it happens when your spouse thinks knows that you are a spender and they are a saver. And they may not always want to be intimate. Why? Because they think as soon as you know that there's a little bit of money, your mind begins to think, what are we going to do with that money? But those are not to do with gender. They're situational. But I would say the difference you will see will be more pronounced on your emotional and your physical intimacy. That will be gender-based. Connie, as a wife, do you want to add something?
Pastor, I was just, you read a lot of things on Facebook and stuff, and sometimes women use physical intimacy to kind of get even in the relationship, and that is very unfair to do that when you are married. And so you think, you didn't want to do that, so goodbye, it's not happening tonight. And that's a very unfair thing to do in a married relationship. So just talk about stuff. Pastor, if I can say, someone here wanted to know, what if you feel uncomfortable about sexual intimacy? It's just out of your comfort zone. How do you get past this? From a Christian home, you're taught not to even think about sex or to associate it with something negative.
Before we get there, I see that Pri Kumalo saying using sex to punish is highest form of witchcraft. of all the words he chose, witchcraft. Pri Kumalo feels very strongly about this stuff. He calls it witchcraft. All right. Let me talk about the person who's uncomfortable. Now that is more prevalent than you think, because when we grow up in our homes, our parents don't always know how to talk about sex. I'm going to talk about my background, which is closer speaking. There is a fear that if you talk to children about sex, you are somewhat encouraging them to have sex. You are planting ideas sex, would never have wanted to have sex. Now that you are giving sex education, you are basically telling them, go ye therefore and have sex. That's the fear. And so what happens is that the information about sex, to a very large degree, has been information that is negative, information that just does not help. It's about don't have sex, it's a sin. Don't have sex, you're gonna fall pregnant. Don't have sex, you're gonna have STDs. Don't have sex, you are too young. Don't have sex, and it's always about don't even think about it. Masturbation is wrong. Pornography. Don't fantasize it. The Bible says if you look at a woman to lust after her in your own mind, you've already committed adultery in your own mind. So we grow up with this idea that with this negative connotation, when it comes sex having negative connotations, it's negative attitude towards sex. Then you get married, and all of a sudden you're supposed to be sexually intimate. Now, hopefully that's what happens, but usually a lot of stuff happens between the time your parents tell you not to do it and the time you get married. But we're not going to discuss that today. So sometimes people get married with this negative thing towards sex, and so when we talk about sex itself, people are uncomfortable. They want to do it bare minimum. Let's just have sex. It'll have to be in the bedroom. It'll have to be at night. It has to be a missionary position. And hopefully when we're trying to have kids, and that's it. We can't do it for recreation. Otherwise it's lust of the flesh kind of situation. And so when the other one is trying to say, no, let's have sex for fun, you kind of feel, no, man, why you want to do these things? And even when you want to have sex, it must be as brief as possible, in and out, just to make sure that you don't end up offending the Lord. So we do have that. And I would say the first thing I'd say to the person who feels uncomfortable is God created sex. He did. He came up with the idea. He designed it. He had the option. I'm not sure. I once watched, I think it was Star Trek. My wife is a big Star Trek fan. Me, not so much. But because I'm married, I watch Star Trek from time to time. So this one time, these Enterprise guys go and meet with this particular species. And with this species, you shake hands, you know, and the act of shaking hands, boom, the other one is pregnant. And so this is what happened. So one of those guys shook hands with someone in the species, and boom, now they were now pregnant. And they were like, how can you just fall pregnant from shaking hands? This is how we do it. This is how we do it. Now, God had the option of making the whole procreation thing happen either via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, you know, or just shaking hands or looking at each other and nodding, and it happens. But no, God decided. He designed sex. He designed all of the feelings that come with it. He designed the nerve endings, the sensitivities. He made us ticklish. He made us smile when someone looks at you in a particular way. He made us respond to humor in a particular way. All of that stuff, God created it. So sex in the fullness of its glory and sexual intimacy was created by God. And it's good to start with that understanding that God created it and He gave it to us as human beings to manage and to use appropriately. And in the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, God said, Paul there says, do not, it starts by saying the wife's body does not belong to her alone, but to her husband also. So same applies to the husband. His body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. And then he says, the husband must give his wife, you know, his marital due, fulfill his marital duty towards his wife. And then he says, do not deprive one another, except with mutual consent. You know, just to set aside time for prayer, and then you come back so that the devil may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So the Bible, not only did God create sex, He has come to say in the New Testament, do not deprive one another. So I would say, hopefully that is a basis for you to think differently about it. It's not going to happen like that overnight. But as you think about that, as you ponder on it, and you think about the fact that the Bible says, enjoy the wife of your youth. And I would say go and read Song of Solomon, fascinating book. And you find out in the Bible, someone talking about your breasts are like pomegranates. I will climb the tree and lay hold of the fruit. It's part of what God has created. That's what I would say to somebody who's uncomfortable with matters of sexual intimacy.
Thank you, Pastor. Gift has his hand up. And then we'll go to Nituli Shai. So Gift, if you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm going to mess it up because I'm beginning to enjoy this sex part of it. But I was still stuck with those intimacies, but it almost gave an impression that there's an initiator and a receiver. And I just wanted to check if that is how it should work, that there's always going to be an initiator, and because I'm worried about I'm burdened by a situation where there are just recipients in the marriage setup of these intimacies, and there's someone who has got a burden who must creatively look for ways of initiating stuff like that, at least in 2021, when the society has become so complex, and you know, if you initiate too much, it might be somewhat linked to patriarchy and stuff like that. I don't know. I just balance. I don't know if we are able to pick up some sense, because I don't have I don't have a way of putting this thing through. But is there an initiator and the receiver in these things?
All right. I think I get what you're saying, and I'm going to try and answer based on what I think you're saying. When you started out the relationship, and I like to talk about this in the context of marriage, because that's where you get to realize that when we're talking about intimacies, we're not always teaching people new things. When you started the relationship, you met the person, probably had a conversation. Now, someone had to initiate the first conversation. Someone had to. There are very few instances where you're both saying hi at the same time, like it's in the movie. Now, boom, hi. Someone usually initiates the conversation. And sometimes one of the two person initiates taking the conversation to the next level, where you're actually talking about the two of you as an item, from the weather to the two of you as an item. Somebody usually initiates a conversation and finds the other one, open to the suggestion, and then it flows. And so you'll find that generally in life, somebody will initiate something and the other person will respond. But you will notice.
Please get out of there. Please get out of.
So you'll find that when as the relationship progresses, the task of initiating is never really allocated to one person. You'll find that sometimes you initiate us going out, the other time she initiates that, the other time you initiate this. It ends up being something that flows between the two of you without being prescribed, because the relationship is just flowing. And so basically it. But you'll find that where you place a premium, you will tend to be the person who initiates more. For example, when we are young in our marriages, because as men, our testosterone is higher, and we generally, not always the case, but generally have a higher libido than our wives, you will find that the matter of sex is more often than not initiated by the men initially. It's not just testosterone sometimes. Sometimes it's mixed with culture, where the ladies may not always initiate, but send signals, and then when you initiate, they're there. So and sometimes the culture is that if she initiates, it's as if she's a loose woman and all of that. And if she's been raised that way, the initiating is not really going to happen. So because she's careful about what you think about her. So you'll find that you'll be initiating that more often than not. But when it comes to taking walks, sometimes holding hands, wearing matching outfits, you'll find that the wife is the one who will tend to initiate those things. So if you look at broadly what happens in the marriage, the initiation generally will flow between the two parties. It will flow between the two parties, two spouses. There will not be one person who initiates every form of intimacy in the marriage. I don't think that happens. If that's happened, that one person is the one initiating, then we have a bigger problem. The problem may be the other one may not be too comfortable to initiate what they want. If everything is initiated by you. But if you notice that the bulk of what you initiate is probably the sex as a man, and you feel, why doesn't she ever initiate? Well, that part to a large degree can be hormonal and cultural, and it's not because of that. Now, this is where sometimes the fears of patriarchy come in, because you don't feel like you don't want to feel like you're being overbearing to your spouse. Same applies when it comes to matters of financial intimacy. Financial intimacy also has to do with background and upbringing and fears that people have. You'll find that in some instances, it's the wife who says, let's open up about money. Sometimes it's the husband who says, let's open up about money. Sometimes in a relationship, it's the one who earns less who says, let's open up about money. Sometimes the one who earns more. So we never quite, there's no formula as to who gets to initiate what. But the short answer is, no one person should have the sole responsibility to initiate. But you will find that sometimes upbringing, exposure, personality could make you be the one who initiates most things. And sometimes that will change over time. You just need to understand your spouse. And remember, in the context of equality, you do this, you do that. The ratio in any relationship will not be 50-50. Sometimes you'll be 60% of that and your spouse is 40% in the same space. Sometimes it's 80-20, sometimes it's 9-10, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 50-50. So it's not always a case that if you initiate so much, she will also match your level. Nah, that's not how it works. But overall, it tends to balance out. You'll find that as spouses over time, we tend to balance each other out in certain areas. And it's something that we embrace. You can't expect that your spouse to match your level of initiation because that's the kind of person you are. Sometimes you married someone who's more introverted or more with reserve than you are. Then yes, the bulk of the initiation will come from you, and that doesn't make you a bad person or a faulty. It does not make your marriage faulty.
And sometimes, Pastor, men are also in society expected to be they almost must come to you, And sometimes in marriage, that females expect the man to chase them still, because then
yes,
and
there's nothing wrong in chasing still in the marriage. There's nothing wrong. For example, even when you get to matters of spiritual intimacy, the ladies will expect that you are, as a head of the household, you must be able to initiate the worship and all of this and all of that. And that's an expectation that you have, and it's part of your leadership function, and that you may end up doing it. It does not mean there's a faulty relationship. Just discuss. The key thing with marriage is find something that works for the two of you. And that's it. If it works for the two of you, the percentages don't matter, and it doesn't really matter what the people in the outside world says. No, you should initiate less, give an opportunity. If it works for the two of you, hallelujah, praise the Lord.
Okay, so now it's Ntuli Shai. If you can, before I do the Facebook comment, if you can go ahead, please.
Hi, Connie.
Hello.
You know, the pastor just answered me.
Your volume is very low.
Oh, I'm saying the pastor just answered me. You know, I just wanted to talk about the scale of being spiritually fed. You know, when we are the one who's always interceding, when you are the one who's always reminding you guys, we need to pray in the house, when you are the one who's constantly reminding people to talk to God, reminding people to do the family worship. You know, I just wanted to know that, what do you do? How can you help the other half
All right.
to spiritually grow as well? Because you get a point where you just get tired.
Okay. Can I just touch on that? It was very, very interesting and important too.
Yes.
For those who may have not picked up this because of the sound that was low, she's asking if you're the one who's always initiating worship, for example. Let's worship, let's have prayer, blah, blah, blah. You know, how can you get the other person to grow and develop spiritually so that they also get to that point where they do it? And this is what I want to say. We come from different backgrounds. Some people in their homes, they had regular family worship growing up every day, morning and evening. It's part of their system. It's part of their makeup at this point. And so it's easier for them to get into the routine of evening worship and family worship. That's it. That's number one. Some other people are just routine people. They do very well with routines. So once they set it up, you know, especially the people who work on to-do lists, you know, it works well for them. Now, then you marry someone who did not grow up in that kind of background, where there may have been prayer, may not have been prayer in the home. There may have been prayer, may have been more haphazard, once in a while kind of thing. Sometimes we prayed when there was a problem, you know, we prayed to ask God for something. And so this person does not have the cultural background of morning and evening worship regularly as a family. It's not there. It's not part of their makeup. And this one to whom it's not part of their makeup, he's the husband. And you who has the upbringing and the makeup, you're the wife. Now, it's not really going to help you to expect him to do it, to remind us about worship. Why? Because it's not going to happen as often as you want it, and you're going to be fighting about new things. This is what I would advise and generally advise. Play to each other's strengths in your marriage. Play to each other's strengths. Don't have the reminding people about worship is not spiritually defined. It's not the Bible does not prescribe who reminds other people about worship. You may say as the head of the household, you know, he should perform that priestly function of leading out in worship. Yes. But if you are better at reminding and keeping track of this, it's time for worship now. You are strong at that, play that function. You take that role and embrace it. You are the person who reminds everybody it's time to worship, time to a family worship. And then he can come on board and lead out, if that's the expectation. In some families, family members take turns leading out in family worship. But if that's part of your strength, you run with it. The same way, if it's your husband's strength to go shopping, let him run with it. If you play to your strengths, the marriage is easier. Because sometimes we feel that this is what he should do because he's a man, this is what he should do, she should do because she's a woman. And we have not been raised that way. There are people who've been raised in setups where it was only boys. And in the home, and so he learned to cook and is very good at it. And you were a girl growing up in a home with 5 girls, and you were the youngest. And you grew up having your older sisters doing the cooking and the cleaning and everything. You were the baby that everybody was trying to take care of. And so because you were the baby that everybody was trying to take care of, you may not be as strong in those household things as your husband, who grew up probably as one of 2 boys. And because there were no girls, they did everything. Play to your strengths. Play to your strengths. But one of the things that makes us unhappy is that if you believe it should be his job, then it feels like a burden. Mm-hmm. It does feel like a burden. It feels like you're doing his job. And that's what makes it heavy. The same way, women who believe that men should be the one who are breadwinners at home, who bring in more money in the household, once she out-earns the husband, it feels like a burden because she feels like she's doing his job. And so it feels like a burden. And yet, if it's not, it's not that the money is too much. It's just that the mind says, I'm doing more than my fair share. I'm now even doing his fair share. A man who believes that the wife is the one who must change the baby, you know, the wife is the one who must wash the children. The moment you ask him to change the baby and you ask him to wash the children and it's consistent, then he feels it as a burden. Why? Because he feels that he's doing your job. So I think that's what usually makes it a burden. Not that in and of itself, reminding people to have worship, it's a burden. But it's just that if there's an expectation that he should be doing it, then it will feel like a burden. If there's an expectation that maybe we should take turns reminding one another, then it will feel like a burden when he doesn't do it as often as you expect them to do it. So I would say, play to your strength. If it's your strength in the marriage to remind us about worship, run with it until Jesus comes. Embrace it. That's what you're going to do until Jesus comes. And don't feel bad about it. Hopefully your husband will hug you and buy you gifts.
Thank you, Pastor. We can take the last question on the Facebook page. How does one revive all these intimacies with a broken heart due to broken trust, loyalty, honesty, infidelity, etc.?
First prize, therapy. Sit with somebody, and I must admit here, I have picked up a lot of male resistance to counseling. You find husbands saying, I don't have a problem. You go, if you have a problem, you go to a counselor. If you want to talk, if you have problems with marriage, you go. You need a third person who may, remember the solution to this is between the two of you, but you need somebody who's going to facilitate the coming out of the solution. You need someone who's going to be able to help both of you to look into the situation and get a different perspective. Somebody who's going to help bring out, first of all, the challenges, things you may not think are a big deal, but may actually be a big deal. I'll make an example. My wife used to want to look at my phone, and I would think to myself, but what does she want from my phone? I don't want anything from her phone. Why is this an issue of wanting to look at my phone? And then I suppose the Lord was being very good to me. A couple came to me to fight about the phone. And in my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this woman is crazy. She should leave this guy's phone alone. So, but you have to sit there, and listen. And then the guy is here and the woman is here and she's telling the story. And as part of the counseling thing, you listen, check if that guy understood what she was saying. He seemed not to get it. So I'm trying to explain, trying to help him understand what she's saying so that at least he gets what she's saying. But in the process, I get to realize, hey man, this business of access to phone is big. It's bigger than I thought. It's really serious. Because now she's talking about things like, if he doesn't want me to look at his phone, I'm wondering, what is he hiding? And I'm thinking, why jump to hide? Why jump to hide? Why can't it just not be a question of him wanting to keep his phone, because he's not interested in yours. But she's raising issues of suspicion, issues of trust. And I'm thinking, over a phone. So by the end of the discussion, I've actually appreciated the value that, man, this is not about the phone. It's about having the access to the phone. It's about knowing that anytime you want to look at the phone, you'll get the phone and it won't be a big deal. But had it not been for that counseling session, I would have continued thinking that woman she's just off. So I go back to the house, of course, after the session, and I put my phone on the table. My wife takes it again. I'm thinking to myself, oh, Lord. And then she goes through it. Who is so-and-so? I'm like, okay, she's in contacts now. So you answer, what is this? Oh, okay, now she's in messages. So after that, I discovered the fact that she knew she had access to it meant that she wanted it actually less than I thought she would. I thought she would want every day, come and check, let me check what. But no, it was a question of having the access. Now, the beauty of the therapist, of the counselor, is that it's someone who is able to show you the severity of something that may not be a big deal to you. And that helps to enrich your relationship. So I would say to that person, try and get somebody. If you can't get to a therapist, find a pastor, find someone that you trust, that you can facilitate the initial discussion, because you need some form of reset button. When there's been infidelity and the breaking of the trust, you need to build that trust, and it's not going to happen automatically. You need to put systems in place to build it, because it's going to be built over time. So you need that. I would encourage that you need that too, but it's possible. Do not think that because it's been bad for a while, it can't be resurrected. It can. It can. The Lord is able to rebuild it. And we are able to work through marriages that way. And people can rediscover a new kind of marriage. Now, it's the marriage you had in the past, before your infidelity, before your hurt, before your broken heart, before your harsh words, that marriage is gone. That marriage is gone. But you are able to build another marriage with the same person. So some people are going to have 2, 3, 4 marriages with the same person. Others are going to have it with different people. But this is going to be a different marriage. It's going to be different from the first one you had. And I would say resist the temptation to try and recreate the marriage you had. That marriage ended when these experiences came on board, because you no longer have approached the relationship with this reckless abandon, this sense that nothing bad is going to happen. Those experiences have taught you things can happen. Now you're going to build a new marriage. It might be better than the one you had before. It might not. It will definitely be different from the one that you had before. But I would strongly advise you to get somebody to help you to do that, because that help will allow you to rebuild a marriage that you can move into the future with.
Pastor, I also find it fascinating. We work very hard on our relationships with children. We read books when we rear children. And I think the same kind of effort has to go into a marriage. We have lots of resources, but we tend to stop working actively on our marriages. We study for degrees, and we can work really hard. But in things that really matter, we take it so for granted that it must just work. We want to put no effort into it, but it must just happen magically, and it's not like that. Marriage takes effort. And the one thing I also observed is that the line between love and hate is so fine. The very person you love so much, you can hate in an instant. Let them just do something to you. And then also, I want to remind people that we do have resources at the Northern Conference, and I think at all the other bookshops. And then also, the publishing department also has lots of books, the Nancy van Pelt, The Highly Effective Marriage. And I go and look at the books we have in our bookshop, and I pick up a lot of books, interesting reads at times, or just to browse through, be intentional about your marriage. Now, we're not intentional, but when the husband looks at someone else, then he is in trouble. But you now so awkward also, he doesn't want to look at you, because you know what I'm saying. You must also not be awkward about it. But Pastor, there's a gentleman here who also wants to know, how can you support a husband going through tough times? Are you available? Very difficult, I guess, for men to make themselves so vulnerable. But the person did message me directly and wanted to know, are you available to probably give counseling or listen to the person?
Yes, the short answer is yes. The long answer is depending on the time, availability of time. But in terms of ability and willingness, yes. But as to when that is going to happen, it has to be juggled between all kinds of appointments. So yes, that usually does. My secretary, Mandla, is usually very, very helpful in setting those up, so that we are able to assist in that regard. So yes, I like what the Brown couple is saying here. The more you invest in your marriage, the more valuable it becomes. Very true, it does. And yes, Nitule, yes, you must just make peace with it. you are the one who are going to run with that.
This is a lot of people are saying, can we have more of these sessions? Well, it makes one realize that there's such a need for it, and people want to work on the marriages. We'll see how we can work on things going forward. Maybe for next year, I've planned a camp so that we can actually make contact and speak about it. And the Zoom platform can and Facebook can be so impersonal at times. But thank you, Pastor, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And Pastor, if you can close for us in prayer, please.
All right, let's bow our heads for prayer. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we spent together this evening. We thank you for the ideas that were shared. We thank you for the information that was shared, the questions that were asked, the clarity that was provided. I thank you, Father, for those people who who are inspired by the Holy Spirit to think of one or two things they could improve in their marriages, those who saw deficiencies in how they do things or do not do things and may have decided to improve. I pray, Father, that you may, through the Holy Spirit, give us the strength to do that which we need to do to improve our marriages. Give us the wisdom to recalibrate our expectations of our marriages and our spouses, particularly where the circumstances do not allow. But most importantly, I pray, Father, that you may bless us with the presence of the Holy Spirit in our lives so that we can become what you have called us to become. Thank you, Father, for hearing our prayers. We thank you for the work that was done by Sister Connie and the Family Ministries Department of the Northern Conference. Continue to bless her and those she works with. May they continue to minister to their constituency in a way that changes lives, that touches families and enriches them. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.